Welcome to the Kontent Rocks podcast, the show about all things Kontent.ai, .net, and Azure for people who want to learn more about headless technology. And now, here's your host, Brian McKeiver.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us once again on the Kontent Rocks podcast. As the intro says, it's all about headless and what can you think about when it comes to headless more than the CMS, and that's the front end aspect of things. And that's why I'm very excited to have Andrew from Uniform on to talk about how Uniform has evolved and changed and solves a lot of composable needs and a lot of different aspects of how you want to build digital experiences. So Andrew, first of all, just thanks for joining me today.
Brian, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Andrew, you and I met earlier this year in January at a really fantastic kind of small conference, beautiful weather, beautiful location. And we got to talking a little bit about how, you've kind of moved up in your role at Uniform. And funny enough, a couple months have went by. We've been trying to do this for a while, schedules got in the way, travel got in the way, but I'm really glad that we were able to finally make it happen. So, how has your year been going so far?
Busy. I think in a nutshell, busy, but busy in a good way. There's been, similar to you, quite a bit of travel. I've had the pleasure and opportunity of speaking on a panel with the Bold Commerce crew at Shop Talk. I got to speak at that CMS experts event in January. Uniform, we've been swamped, which is good. And our product offering keeps evolving and iterating. We're really following our customers' demand and a little bit of market demand, but we are kind of being pulled and pushed by our customer base, which is good. So we're getting a lot of good innovation and feedback that way. The last year has been busy.
Fantastic.
It's been
All right.
good.
So your official title now is Global Vice President at Uniform, and I believe that means you kind of have to take care of everything. Is that the way everyone thinks about it now?
Not necessarily everything, but like I lean into many different supporting functions. So we term it customer solutions. So sometimes I'll hop on a call with our large enterprise customers and prospects and help them figure out their stack and their evaluation and what kind of tools we integrate with, or just helping our internal team prep for a really intricate demo across multiple tools across the headless kind of composable stack. So there's a supporting function there. Now our technology partnerships and our integration backlog, that's something I'm also supporting. So working with a dev team and working with a product owner, and then also working with our CTO to make sure that we are following market demand, we're assessing market demand, but then we also have the right partnerships in place, and we are going to market with our tech partners and helping that 1 + 1 = 3, like helping our tech partners like Kontent.ai, helping them be more successful with their customers or in their positioning in the market. So that's another kind of area that I support. And recently I'm starting to support more and more agency partners such as yourself, spending time helping get agency teams comfortable and confident talking about Uniform. So there's a bit of an enablement there, but then also being able to deploy and use Uniform and train their customers with confidence. So getting the developers set up, getting the marketers set up, the merchandisers, the content ops. And then kind of facilitating that. We have a lot of internal experts. So how do we navigate what's happening outside of our world and inside of our world? It's kind of an area that I'm bridging. So a lot of supporting functions, I would say. And occasionally,
You're a busy man.
Yeah.
But honestly, we both agreed back in January even that because the product has evolved and there is some new features, and one of your strong technology partners for years now actually has been Kontent.ai. I mean, I've even had people from Uniform on before on the podcast, and it's great to now kind of come full circle a little bit with see what's updated, and that's really was the impetus for actually having this episode. And I think you've got a couple things that you can show us today, so maybe we should dive right into that, and you can answer a couple questions about what's new, what's different, and then we even have some interesting collision of areas possibly that we can talk about when it comes to the CMS aspect of things. So I know if you want to share your screen, I'm going to actually throw it right up right now, and you should be seeing this. And if you're just listening, a couple slides here from Andrew about what's going on at Uniform. But I'm going to step back and, please take us through it. I'll ask a couple questions, but I'm very excited to see what you have for us today.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, yeah. So I have had a windy journey on my way to Uniform. So I've worked both client side, agency side, and now vendor side. Kind of culminated now at Uniform, where we have content management as capability, where we have personalization and experimentation as capability, where we have APIs and integrations as capability, and I so I can kind of speak to the various facets of Uniform. So it's almost like serendipitous that I landed here, and then I picked up a collection of skills that's congruent to what we're doing at Uniform.
Yeah, it's almost like
Now,
aggregated fully all into one perfect platform for you to work at.
yeah, and it is a bit more focused, right? Like we are definitely very much focused on digital experience and experience management, and so having that tooling with that focus is quite nice. Um, the running joke, I've talked about with colleagues at TELUS, and they're like, we've been trying to solve this problem since 2016. So some of the problems around visual management, API integrations, content supply chain, I have literally been trying to solve in this mock composable world for 8 years. Now I'm at Uniform, and I'm like, I think we got it. I think I'm comfortable. We finally solved some of these challenges around keeping developers happy and marketers happy. Some of these challenges around being able to visually take data from different APIs and plot it onto a screen without a ton of developer effort. And those have always been challenges that have slowed down the adoption of headless tools and composable tools. But at the same time, we're challenging in the more visual building tools to begin with, because you were fixed on one content system, and you were fixed into their templating, and sometimes into their specific, I'm joking about using Java and Jackrabbit and having PTSD about some of those frameworks from back in the day, and thinking there are people today that are still doing this, and to them an 18-month implementation is normal, and to us that seems ludicrous. Like six months is a standard, not 18 months. And so yeah, there are definitely some scar tissue.
Well, yeah, let's get into it. Just let's go right to it. You've
So
mentioned experience management and how that's a focus. I'd love to see, how does Uniform now think about that? How do they?
Mock 3 is coming up, and the Mock Alliance conference. If you're familiar with the Mock Alliance, they have this kind of architecture diagram of what on the right hand side of the pieces of the puzzle that a modern enterprise will use to build their stack. And what I've done here is I've kind of layered on, okay, there are areas where Uniform, we have that capability covered out of the box. This is our strength. So something like digital experience composition, experience management, that's where Uniform fits. But then we also have an API integration layer. So in some areas we have it built in in some scenarios we'll also integrate with a third-party tool. So there's no lock-in. You can kind of pick and choose what's best for your organization. But yeah, we generally cluster around experience management, content management, personalization, and some asset management, which is fairly new and not super mature, but we have a fallback. Where you see the speed icon, that's where we have a no-code, one-click integration. And then where you see the rocket, that tends to be where we have accelerators and code samples to help out our customers. Now, we're going to talk about content AI and content management, but I want to start by just putting it out there that content itself is kind of it's not simple, right? There are different types of content, and this is one of the drivers as to why we are purpose built the way we are purpose built. There are different types of content, and you put them in the right tool based on your needs. So something like stable content, your articles, your legals, your news, they don't necessarily have a high change. They have a low change frequency. They're highly reusable across experiences and channels. That's something that's perfect for a headless CMS. But then something that's volatile content, like your landing pages or promotions or call to actions, these are basically strings or decorator content that changes all the time, and it's not reused beyond that initial implementation. It's almost ephemeral in a way. So I have some text that only lives on one page, putting that in a headless CMS where it's never going to be reused is kind of overkill and over-engineering it in the headless CMS. So this is kind of one of the areas where Uniform is filling that gap and saying, okay, this is the type of content. It's never going to live beyond one page, and you may kill that page in 3 months. That's a gap that we're solving in this ecosystem. Experience management and presentation content. So a lot of this isn't even content. It's just metadata to describe how the content should be displayed. So I'll show an example how like something like a hero for a front-end React component might require 36 different props. And 2 or 3 of those props is the title and the description but the other 33 are just like, is this a left-right banner, a right-left banner? Is it a full bleed banner? What video do I put in the background? It's just manipulating the presentation of that component. And that we have a very clean divide where we separate how components are modeled differently than how content is modeled. So you can keep that clean and separate and say, here's all my presentation configuration in one step. And then my content types and content models can live in the headless CMS in a very neat and organized and reusable way. So that's another area. And then finally, AI, right? AI is just going to throw everything through. If you have a messy setup with a mix of content and display and presentation in your headless CMS, and then you layer on AI, it's just going to make the mess bigger. And I think this is where we have seen customers in their own slides say separating these concerns with Uniform and our headless CMS is very, very important. Otherwise, whatever bad stuff we put in the headless CMS gets worse with AI. But if we clean it up, then our content in our headless CMS, we can apply AI to it all we want, and it will maintain the cleanliness. I can take this content object, use AI to translate it, localize it, and apply it to an audience in a workflow, and my output will be very clean because we've stripped away all the presentation. Like
Yeah.
we don't
And I think
get
that,
muddying the waters.
that point resonates with me quite a bit as an implementator, right? We are working with a couple clients right now where we constantly educate that the presentation layer, the component system, the design system, it's its own thing, and it has its own responsibilities and value that it brings to your solution or your stack. And you do not really want to have that sort of configuration
Yeah.
detail in the content model itself. Now, I will push back a little bit on you just because I've been doing
Of
this
course.
for as long as you have, and say that once in a while, when it's a maybe less mature organization who doesn't have as many options, maybe some of that is okay. But yeah, I also agree with what you're saying at the end there. Like the AI aspect of it is going to work better with more clean and consistent data. But I still think that the vision that you're showing here, I completely agree with. In that separating those things out as a goal is something that if you're listening to this podcast, that's one major
Yeah.
takeaway from today, is that is really key to having a good solution.
Yeah, that's definitely it. Some quick lessons learned from our customers. I don't think anyone's going to debate this anymore, that legacy systems tend to be slow and clunky because you're doing a lot and everything's jammed up into one thing. So you ship as one, you have challenges there. Where we might get some pushback is this one, right? So like there's almost 2 ends of the spectrum. You have your legacy system all in one, sometimes called a monolith, slow and clunky. You can kind of get slow and clunky when you go full on composable and headless, because everything is its own point and you ship them all individually. But when you start having 3, 4, 5 different systems in your stack, the complexity increases.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're actively trying to reconcile. And this is kind of the space that we live in, is how can we bring balance to the composable world? And because there is definitely value in having all your independent points, because you can then use the best tools that are available to you but then in a way that's not so much overhead to manage. There are some solutions in market, but often they leave marketers behind. So when you connect everything to your CMS can get super bloated and hard to operate because you're now mixing and matching different things, some presentation, some metadata, some configuration, and then a marketer goes, well, where's my actual content? So
Right.
that's problematic. And I have seen this happen where the CMS gets so complicated, like the content model gets so complicated that a marketer says, I don't have the time to figure this out. I'm just going to write this up in a Jira ticket. And then the developer has to go fulfill that task. Now you've lost the whole advantage over at the CMS.
Right. The whole point is not to have a developer have to do everything for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, even if you're following it in the on the LinkedIn space in the industry of some of the people, there's this whole drama around what is composable. Is composable overkill? Is it too little, too much? Like, this topic is very timely, and to
Yep.
see some of these opinions fly by. I think you've been following that a little bit too, right, Andrew? The whole set of posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah, to a certain degree, yeah. The challenge I find though is like uh, I think about like there's a bit of a rubber band moment that I think is about to hit us, right? Where we have different users and so some, because like when I'm speaking to a broad base of users, some of them are like, I don't have time to learn about this whole composable thing. I'm going to stick with my DXP. And then some are like, I don't actually care. I just need to get my job done. And then some are like, composable is the way of the future. And it roughly balances into one third, one third, one third. Now, when we take a look at that third, the group that says, I don't have time to learn about this, I'm just going to stick with my DXP, tend to be much later in their career. And then the group in the middle is like, they're just in the middle. They're kind of mid-career. And then the ones that are like, composable is the way to go tend to be a bit younger. So when you apply that demographic logic, what we're going to see the next 5 to 10 years is the people that are like, I'm just going to stick with my DXP will retire out of the market. And then then you end up with 2/3 of the group that are like, one group's firmly like, we got to go composable because those are the best tools and that's exciting and sexy. And then one group that's like, whatever gets the job done.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So I can see a little bit of a snapback of like, okay, we're going to see more composable adoption. And then Google is going to continue to push everyone on their performance and front end, and you're just not getting that from the legacy DXPs. You're still slow page loads, slow response times, slow turnaround times. It's just that slowness, I think, is ultimately what the driver was. And I think
Right.
like Adobe is decomposing themselves. Sitecore is composable, optimizing. So even the legacy DXPs recognize this, right? They're going to become composable themselves.
And
It's happening.
my belief is whether you're working with a traditional all-in-one, whether you're working with composable, the way you actually implement still matters quite a bit because you can do really, really fast all-in-one DXP solutions these days. We
Yep.
do it all the time. You can do really, really slow composable things if you do it wrong. So like
Yep.
the hopefully the people who we are describing in those thirds, that they start to realize that at the end of the day, it's still, follow some best practices, measure speed, deliver performance. You can do that with all
Yeah.
the tools, right? But make sure you're doing it the right one for the right fit.
It's like you can put a drill in anyone's hand. It doesn't mean you're going to get the same output.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, some of the
Okay. So
other
yeah, back to the slides because we could probably sit here all
no,
day
no, you're
talking
fine.
about this.
Some of the other solutions we're seeing in market, again, like this one around ESBs or iPaaS. So being able to stitch together data in an API way. It's still a pretty technical user-based technical audience. You need specialized training. This is something like the MuleSofts of the world. The third option around connecting data sources through a developer solution, this is where I see things like GraphQL. Like if I need to go get data out of my CMS and out of my commerce system and out of my DAM, in GraphQL, I'm writing queries. And it's a handy thing for a developer to do. It is impossible for a non-developer to do. I was here. What other questions, comments do you have before I can kind of jump in and show some things if you like?
Yeah, I think, before we jump and show something, one of the big things that I was hoping to get out of this conversation was to clearly understand, as Uniform has evolved, you've mentioned it a second ago, like you're actually including a content management system in a way now. And obviously, if you're connecting and integrating with your technology partners and other headless CMSs, we now have what could be seen as like a competing solution here. So, love to just get your honest take on, would you use both? Would you use one over the other? Is there a fit? Like, if we could get that kind of clearly answered, that would be awesome from my perspective, and I think also for a lot of the listeners who might be
Yeah.
Kontent.ai customers.
Yeah. So we generally see our customers use both, right? They will use Uniform in conjunction with Kontent AI, and it really comes down to the notion of a content supply chain and the different types of content. You might have content that's reusable, and you need to live across multiple channels, multiple experiences. In that case, we treat it as a reference. We will always be a pointer back to that source, but then you might have to put some stuff inline. So this notion of providing flexibility to our joint customers so that they can manage their content supply chain, that's really the goal. Can I jump in and start showing some
Yeah,
stuff?
go right ahead. Yep.
All right. So I'm gonna jump in here. So one of the first things that we see when our customers, here, I'll zoom in here too, so we get that. When our customers coming from a DXP or even using headless CMS, is they sometimes they say, oh, I just want my hierarchy back. So that's something that Uniform has out of the box, is this notion of hierarchy. Now, like most headless CMSs, we have the ability to create models and create content types. Now, where it gets interesting is when you're creating a content type in Uniform, it's not fixed to any content entries that are also in Uniform. You can mix and match your different data sources. So if I look at an article, my article is pretty basic, right? It has a title, description, a thumbnail, some content, whatever, right? But let's go into an article. So I'm going to go into an article that says 5 things you can do with a used coffee ground. So like every other headless CMS I can put content inline, but that's not the main purpose for Uniform. The main purpose for Uniform is, say I want to put something inline, but I want to mix and match it. So say coffee grind is actually part of a product content type or another source. So I can click this little button on the side here and insert what's called a dynamic token. And then what Uniform is doing is I can go into, let's see, here's Kontent AI. So let me go pull in some article information that's already in Kontent AI. So I go in there and I'll select this one, another from Roma with Love. I hit accept. And now I can see I can start to reference my different things here. So let's go into this one, another from Roma with Love. So I can insert it here and remove what's locally, or append or mix and match or enrich. So I can recreate my articles in Uniform in a different schema or format, because what's in Kontent AI is modeled to be highly reusable. But what's happening in Uniform is I need something that's specific to an experience. So I can use this type of schema to map things. So say I get the title from that article, but I need to add in something locally, or I want to translate it across multiple languages, or I want to take everything in the record and translate it to my current locale. I have flexibility to operate on top of that content, even though it's coming from an upstream system. And we will treat it as a reference point. So, but we'll reconcile and merge the API automatically. So as a developer calling for this article, I don't need to know, hey, this piece of content is from Kontent AI, and this piece of content is from a commerce system, and this piece of content is from Uniform. It all comes together in one clean payload. So this is how a content operator can support, and it's almost like we're doing what GraphQL is doing, but it's doing it in a very visual way with some local ability to add in some inline text as needed for my purpose.
And I think the title example is one you're just quickly showing to showcase what it can do, right? I think in the real world, I don't know if you would do a title a ton, but where I see it being huge would be like, think of a product detail page, and you have features and benefits in your PIM for that product detail page, and you want to put that in the middle of the description field that does come from Kontent.ai, that has the 5 or 6 paragraph intro. Maybe you have another system that can do customer reviews. You're pulling that in, and using this kind of dynamic token system, you could put it all together, right? Is that kind of how I'm understanding it?
That's exactly it. So in this description, I can have a little bit from Uniform, a little bit from Kontent AI, but I could also, if say I want to add something from like an e-commerce system is a good example, right? So what I'll do here is I'll click add new. I'll go into, let's see, SAP, for example. Let's go into SAP. Let's select. So what's happening is Uniform, we go into that third-party upstream system. Let's go find camera, for example. I hit accept. And then now I can go pull in my product title, right? So here's the name of that product. So now I can mix and match. I have something coming from my commerce system, something coming from Kontent AI, and then this is what I call decorator content. It's this thing in the middle that might just exist to make that language a little bit neater for the purposes of my experience. And that's what I store in Uniform. So I can mix and match my content sources pretty neatly. Now, this is how we do this in like a headless content management way. So we call this like a uniform content model. So you can remap schemas based on what's happening in your headless CMS. And ultimately, the goal is to keep the headless CMS as clean and as reusable as possible, and then make any tweaks and changes for the experience in Uniform. So that's the abstraction. The other way we do this is, say I go into something like a homepage. And some of the things too is, if you think about what we just stitched together with something from SAP and something from Kontent AI, now how do I schedule a release or schedule a publish across all those different sources, SAP has one mechanism, Kontent.ai has another mechanism, but Uniform has kind of a group mechanism where you can schedule things across those systems of record, apply it to a release, and have it ready for a future release. So if I go into like my June summer campaign, I can mix and match my sources, but then be able to preview what's coming out of everything in one window pane. And similarly, so I can also do this inline where I have Hello Stranger, see this purple bubble, it's coming from some upstream content management system, but the eyebrow text, right? The eyebrow text, that's something that's pretty specific to this particular component or pattern. So I put the eyebrow text for the release. I can put that locally and then reuse my global content as necessary. So I can do that on screen or in a content entry, and I have flexibility to do both ways. So this is often one of the reasons why someone will lean on something like Uniform to mix and match that content supply chain. And then the other thing too is you can then do it across multiple records. So this is a variant of one banner, but if I have multiple banners, so this one's someone's interested in coffee makers, interested in coffee beans. So I have this personalization container where I can stack 5 banners for different audiences with different layouts, different components, even though the content is still coming from a central source. So it's really about expanding that flexibility, but doing so in a way that doesn't keep going back to the developer. Because our customers before Uniform were definitely doing this, they're just doing it in code. And now we're giving a configuration option to democratize who can actually apply different rules, different personalization, bring content together in a neat way.
Yeah, and I think the configuration manager or option thing is a point to clearly call out here too, because you and I were talking about how a lot of headless CMSs, think of just the hero carousel or hero area banner component, whatever you want to call it. There's going to be sometimes a show image, hide image, or use video or don't use video, or left, right switch that somehow just becomes like a Boolean type field in your CMS. And it really is truly about controlling the presentation. So it feels like we're breaking our best practices and our standards of separating out component system from content model. And I think by having that ability, doing the quick labels, as you're saying, decorator content, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and so we have a specific capability just to model components. So here's that hero you're talking about, right? There's 36 fields in this hero, but you can see a lot of it's like overlay opacity. This isn't content. This is just presentation information needed to power that front end, background color, text color. So a lot of these fields have nothing to do with content, and that's why we've separated the modeling of the component completely different than the modeling of the content to create that abstraction. And where this is really nice is once I set this up, or one of our partners like Bitstream sets this up on behalf of their customer, when I go back into my homepage, it makes it really easy to kind of operate. So if I look at my headers again, so let's let this load. Now this is all going to show up in the right-hand pane. So I have this banner that's Hello Strangers, and you can see it's animating, but on the right-hand side here, I have content in one, but then here's my CTA, here are my button colors, here's my secondary CTA, here are my button colors, here's my image settings, I have my overlay opacity, presentation settings. Like putting all of this type of power in a headless CMS is very, very difficult and really does mess up the content model. It kind of makes that content not reusable. And we have heard complaints that like as a marketer or operator, it's hard to author content when I have all of this extra stuff in there. Whereas, so we create that abstraction, so you manage the presentation in Uniform, and you can still manage a really neat, organized content entry in Kontent.ai.
Yep. And if you're, a veteran Kontent.ai user, you may be going, well, wait a minute. We have Web Spotlight in Kontent.ai, which is a visual editor. And that is true. There is a great use case for that in Kontent.ai, but that's when the data is only in Kontent.ai, right? And Andrew, this is how Uniform kind of differentiates is it's like when you have those multiple systems in play, but you still want to have the full visual control, right? That's a good understanding of it?
That's exactly it, right? It's the Web Spotlight, if everything you have is within Kontent.ai, Web Spotlight does the job. The moment you have content, like in this example, I have product information coming from a PIM or e-commerce system, I have recommended products, and then I have some just simple like banners and images. Some of it might be coming from a DAM, some of it might be coming from Kontent AI, right? It's that multi-source. We're kind of like a Switzerland, or like a neutral player. No matter what your data source is, we will be that visual operator on top of any of the data sources. Like we have that content management capability I've shown, but we don't treat our own with any specialization. Like whether you're using Uniform or Kontent AI or both or an e-commerce system, it's all treated the same, and that is something and that's by design, right? Because like a lot of our customers already have a headless CMS in place, and we don't want them to have to re-platform. It makes no sense. Actually, use that tool in the right way, and then use Uniform in the right way, and a lot of our customers end up being happier because their Kontent AI setup is so clean. And about orchestration and payloads, when I create this page and assemble this page, what Uniform is doing behind the scenes is it's transforming. So my API response from Kontent AI looks in one format. My API response from SAP Commerce looks in another format, but the front end gets a really neat, organized, transformed, and trimmed payload. So there's no mapping of like I get this payload and put it into this front end component. It's automatically done on behalf of, like, Uniform takes care of that. So a lot of the other systems where they aggregate APIs from multiple sources, you get all of your content in one payload, but then you still have to map it back to your front end components. So you're writing transformation code to get from schema A to schema B. That's something that Uniform is doing out of the box, right? So that's one nice thing here around.
First of all, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. And I know that we talked a little bit in the pre stage of this conversation that if people do want to learn more, or they would just want to contact you, ask a question about, what is that threshold for complexity, or how does Uniform handle, composition and component modeling and things like that. I'm throwing your LinkedIn up there on the screen. But again, this has been fantastic. I think we've learned a lot. I think we've seen how Uniform has evolved. I congratulate you and the team on fantastic efforts. And I'm excited to see you the rest of this year at a couple conferences. We may see each other in person. So thank you so much for joining me.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for the time. All right, take care.
All right. And that has been the latest episode of Kontent Rocks. Yeah, everyone. Thanks.